Back in 2022, I had one of the worst weekends of my life. And the thing that makes it hard to talk about is that nothing I can describe sounds that bad on paper. But it was. It genuinely was. My fiance, Marcus, and I had been together for almost 4 years by that point. We'd just gotten out of our apartment lease and didn't want to lock into another one while we were saving to buy something. Marcus's aunt's former landlord, this older man named Gerald, who Marcus's aunt had known for decades, offered us a place to stay. His last tenants, an older married couple, had both passed away within about a month of each other. The husband first, then the wife not long after. Gerald wanted someone in the house while he figured out what to do with the property long term, so he gave us an incredibly low rate. Month to month. No long commitment. It took a lot of pressure off the situation. I want to be upfront about something. I was not thrilled about this arrangement from the beginning. Not because I'm the type of person who believes in haunted houses or bad energy or any of that. I'm not. I grew up in a family that had zero patience for that stuff. My dad would have laughed me out of the room. But there is just something psychologically uncomfortable about moving into a space where two people recently died. That's a completely rational feeling, I think. Marcus disagreed, obviously. He saw a nice house at a fraction of the price, and that was the end of the conversation for him. Gerald had the place cleaned before we moved in, but you could still tell that it had been sitting for a while. The walls had that faint, closed-up smell. The master bedroom had an old area rug that Gerald agreed to pull up before we settled in. Underneath it were hardwood floors that cleaned up beautifully. Gerald also had the exterior locks rekeyed and installed a basic security system, the kind that announces every door in a flat, robotic voice. Back door open. Front door open. Marcus thought it was funny. I thought it was going to drive me insane. It did drive me insane, but it also ended up being the thing that terrified me the most that weekend. We had been in the house for about 6 weeks when Marcus left for his cousin Dree's bachelor trip. It was a long weekend, Friday morning to Sunday afternoon. But this house still had an edge to it for me, an unfamiliarity I hadn't totally shaken. I had our dog Pepper, a 4-year-old Australian Shepherd, and she was good company. Smart, calm, and weirdly perceptive in the way that breed tends to be. Friday the 9th, Marcus left around 9 in the morning. I spent most of the day working, ordered myself a curry from the place nearby that Marcus wouldn't eat, and watched a crime documentary series I'd been putting off because Marcus hates that stuff too. It was actually a pleasant evening. Pepper stayed on the couch next to me the whole time, head on my thigh. Normal night. It was close to 11:30 when I started hearing something coming from the basement. The house was older, probably from the mid-70s, and I'd already gotten used to it making sounds, pipes, the furnace cycling on and off, that kind of thing. But this was different. It was more of a hollow thudding, like something had shifted or fallen over down there. I muted the TV and listened. Pepper lifted her head. I told myself it was probably something on the shelves we'd put down there, some of our boxes from the apartment. I'd stacked them, and they weren't exactly stable. That made sense. I turned the TV back on. Pepper put her head back down. About 20 minutes later, she sat up straight. Then she got off the couch entirely and walked to the basement door and just stood there. Pepper doesn't bark. I mean that literally. In 4 years, I'd heard her bark maybe a handful of times, and always at something real. A deer in the yard, someone knocking. She mostly just whined or made this low chuffing sound. But that night, she started barking. Short, tense, clipped, like she was issuing a warning. I went over and tried to calm her down. She stopped barking but wouldn't move away from the door. Her whole body was rigid. I stood there for a minute, trying to decide what to do. And I did something that, in retrospect, I can acknowledge was not smart. I opened the basement door. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was just so sure it was the boxes that I wanted to prove it to myself. I hit the light switch and looked down the stairs. Nothing looked obviously wrong from the top. Pepper stopped barking the second the door opened, but she started making that low sound in her throat that told me she was not okay with whatever was happening. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds and then shut the door. I wasn't going down there. I'm allowed to say that. It was late. I was alone, and the man who used to live in that house had died in that basement. I've had people tease me about that detail, but I don't apologize for it. I went to bed with Pepper, and she planted herself at the foot of the mattress facing the door. She stayed like that all night. I know because I barely slept. Every time I opened my eyes, she was in the same position, ears slightly forward, watching. I finally fell asleep sometime after 3. Saturday morning, I felt okay. Tired, but okay. I made coffee, called Marcus, told him about Pepper's reaction. He thought the boxes had definitely fallen, and she heard something move. Totally reasonable. He said to check it out in the daylight and let him know. I went down to the basement with the lights on, Pepper right behind me, and found nothing. The boxes were exactly where I'd left them. Nothing on the shelves had fallen. I stood in the middle of the basement for a minute, looked around, and went back upstairs. That was when I went to put in a load of laundry. The laundry room was off the main hallway. When I pushed open the door, I stopped. The washing machine was pulled out from the wall. Not a little, significantly. It was maybe 2.5 feet from where it normally sat. The dryer was still in place, flush against the wall. Just the washer had moved. I backed out of the doorway and stood in the hall for a second before I went back in. I walked around the machine and looked at it. Nothing broken, nothing disconnected. I pushed it back. It was heavy enough that I had to really brace myself to do it. There was no way that thing moved on its own from vibration or a spin cycle I'd run earlier. I would have heard it. The laundry room shared a wall with the living room, and I'd been sitting right there. I called Marcus again and told him. He got quiet in a way he usually doesn't. He said he was going to check on leaving early Sunday instead of afternoon. I said okay. Saturday night I ordered pizza, turned on a show, and tried to just get through it. Pepper stayed close. Around 9:45 I heard something outside, a loud bang, sharp enough that I flinched, like a transformer blowing, that kind of sound. Then my phone buzzed with an alert from the security app. The app showed clips from the camera Gerald had mounted above the garage. In the clip, I could see the side gate to the backyard, which was open. We kept it latched. I know we kept it latched because Marcus had a habit of checking it every time we went in or out. In the clip, there was also a light, a flash, brief, like something reflecting off the lens. Then, nothing. The gate was just open. I didn't go outside to check it. That's one thing I can say I did right. I sat on the couch with Pepper and I didn't move. Getting to sleep that night took a long time. I finally drifted off sometime after 2. I woke up fast. The kind of fast where you don't know where you are for a second. Someone was knocking on the front door. I looked at my phone, 3:52 in the morning. The knocking wasn't polite. It was loud and rhythmic, and it didn't stop. Pepper was already off the bed, standing at the bedroom door. I sat up and tried to figure out what to do. The knocking kept going. Then it stopped, and a second later I heard it. Front door open. The security system. The front door was open. I locked the bedroom door and grabbed my phone to call 911. The screen was black. I pressed the button on the side and it lit up black, no interface, just dark. I'm not sure how long I stood there pressing the button over and over before I finally called out for anyone to hear me. The doorknob to my bedroom moved. Not a lot, just enough that I could see it. I screamed at whoever was there to leave. Then I pressed my phone button again and the screen came on. I called the police. They were there in under 10 minutes. They found the front door wide open. No sign of anyone inside or outside. No prints, nothing disturbed, nothing taken. The officer who talked to me said the wind probably caught the door. It was July, humid. There was no wind. I nodded and didn't argue. I took Pepper and drove to my friend Cass's place and stayed there until Marcus came back Sunday morning earlier than planned. He didn't dismiss what I told him. He just didn't know what to make of it. Neither did I. We stayed in that house for another 2 months until we closed on our place. Nothing happened again, not once, which somehow makes the whole thing harder to file away. If it had kept happening, maybe it would be easier to label it as something. Instead, it was just those 2 days. And 3 years later, I'm still thinking about the doorknob turning. I'm not going to pretend I'm a social person. I'm not. I'm 29, I live alone, I work at a home improvement store, and my main hobbies are building model kits and rewatching the same handful of TV shows I already know I like. I've got a tight circle of people I care about, and I'm good with that. My best friend since middle school is a woman named Petra, and she is the only reason I've ever been on a date as an adult, because she refuses to let me become a hermit. At the time this happened, I was renting the bottom floor of a duplex in a mid-sized town in western Ohio. Not a rough neighborhood, not fancy either. The only thing that made it weird was that there was a bar maybe 40 yards from my back fence line, separated by a row of pine trees. Most of the time it was fine. Weekends were loud. The night crowd from that place would spill out into the lot and smoke and argue, and if I was trying to sleep before midnight on a Saturday, it just wasn't going to happen. I had learned to live with it. One Saturday in October, Petra came over for dinner. She'd been trying to talk me into signing up for a dating app, and I had been deflecting for about 3 months. She's persistent. We ate takeout. She ran me through her bullet points. I told her I'd think about it. At about 10:15, her boyfriend called and said he was heading home from his shift, so she packed up and I walked her out to her car. We said goodbye in the driveway. I watched her back out, and then I just stood there for a minute. The night was cool, and I wasn't in a hurry to go back inside. I could hear the noise from the bar, voices and music, even over the fence and through the trees. I was about to head in when I glanced toward the lot and noticed a cluster of people outside the bar's side entrance. A group of women, maybe 6 or 7 of them. I wasn't paying much attention. And then I realized one of them was looking directly at me. I wasn't sure at first. It was dark, and she was probably 30 feet away, and I figured I was just in her line of sight. The rest of the group went back inside. She didn't. She stayed there, hands in her jacket pockets, looking toward my driveway. Then she raised her hand and waved. A slow, deliberate wave. I didn't react. She waved again, bigger this time. I lifted my hand in a kind of reluctant acknowledgement, and she smiled. I could see that much from where I was. And then she turned and went inside. I went back in and didn't think much about it. Weird, sure, but it's a bar. People do things. I got back to my model kit and then switched to a video game around 11. At about 1:15 in the morning, I heard a knock at my front door. Soft, almost polite. I paused and listened. It came again. I wasn't panicked. I'd had people wander from the bar to my door before, lost or looking for a cab or just being idiots. I went to the peephole and looked out. Nobody was there. I stood in the hallway for a second. Drunk bar wanderer, knocked on the wrong door, got embarrassed, left. That was the most logical explanation, and I went with it. My heart was doing that low-grade nervous thing it does after something unexpected, so I didn't go straight back to the game. I sat in the front room with my laptop for a while instead. At around 1:35, I got up and looked out the window next to the door, just out of habit. Nobody on the porch, but when I looked out toward the street, the dome light inside my car was on, and the driver's door wasn't latched all the way. I could see the small gap. Okay, so that was not nothing. Someone had been in my car, or at least at my car. I wasn't scared, I was annoyed. My car had been broken into twice before, and there was never anything to find. I didn't leave anything in there, but I also didn't want to wake up to a dead battery. So I grabbed my keys, unlocked the front door, and went out to close it properly. I checked the back seat before I got close to the door. Empty. I closed the door, locked the car, and went back inside. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed something. There was a smell, sweet and floral, perfume, very deliberate, the kind you can taste in the back of your throat when someone's wearing too much of it. I stood there for a second. Petra doesn't wear perfume. I don't wear perfume. The smell was right at the front door, like someone had been standing there recently. I went back inside and locked the deadbolt. I finished what I was doing on the laptop, turned off the game, and went to bed around 2:30. I had a movie playing quietly. I was halfway to sleep when I heard something and sat up. I turned the movie off. I heard it again. Footsteps, light and quick, somewhere in the house. Not outside, inside. And then a sound that I still think about, a giggle, soft, almost playful, coming from the direction of the hallway. I shut my bedroom door fully and called 911. I told them I thought someone was in my house. I stayed on the line until I heard them knock. While I was waiting, I sat on the floor against the wall next to the bed, holding a camping flashlight because it was the only solid object within reach. When the officers came in and I came out of the bedroom, they were already in the kitchen. I stepped around the corner and froze. One of the officers was in the kitchen doorway, and past him I could see that the back window, the one over the sink that I never opened, was unlatched and pushed up about 4 inches. That's how she got out. That's what the officer told me. They found footprints in the muddy strip along the back of the house, leading from the fence line to the window and back. Small shoe, pointed toe, and on my kitchen counter, sitting next to the coffee maker, was a single earring. Gold, small teardrop shape, not mine. I've never owned anything like it. The officer bagged it. The next day I went to the bar and described her. The woman at the bar had been asked to leave earlier that night. The bartender remembered her, said she came in alone, ordered 2 drinks, and started making people uncomfortable. She wasn't violent, just off. Kept talking to people who weren't responding to her. I got a chain lock for the back door and a contact alarm for every window. That was 14 months ago. I never saw her again. But sometimes when I'm in the kitchen at night, I still think about the fact that she was standing in there in the dark, completely still, for probably 20 minutes before I heard her. Just standing there waiting for something. I've never been able to figure out what. I want to start by saying that I am a rational person. I've never been someone who got scared easily or believed in things I couldn't explain. I work in commercial real estate staging. My job is to walk into unfamiliar properties alone and figure out how to make them feel livable. I've been in hundreds of empty houses, old houses, houses with histories, houses in bad parts of town. I've never once felt anything I would describe as fear. That changed about 14 months ago. I'd been living alone my whole adult life by choice. I'm 34. I run my own small operation, just me and 2 part-time contractors, and I've worked hard enough that I was finally able to buy my own home last year. A 4-bedroom Craftsman in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from the city center. Older house, good bones. I moved in and spent the first few months getting settled. I kept most of my work equipment in the spare bedroom on the main floor and used the house the way I've always used my space, efficiently, quietly, alone. About 3 months after I moved in, I started hearing something. The first time was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the spare room going through fabric samples, and I heard a sound I can only describe as shuffling, like something being dragged slowly across a floor. It lasted maybe 5 seconds and then stopped. I looked up and went back to work. The second time was a few days later. Same sound, same duration. I went out into the hallway and looked up at the ceiling and listened. Nothing. I checked the guest room, the bathroom, the upstairs landing. Nothing. I decided it was probably squirrels. My parents had squirrels in the attic when I was growing up, and this house was old enough that the siding had gaps. I told myself I'd deal with it and forgot about it for a while. The shuffling kept happening over the next week or so, always during the day, always brief. I wrote a sticky note and put it on my laptop, call exterminator. Then I worked 16-hour days for the rest of the week and ignored it. The night things changed. I'd been working very late. I finally closed my laptop at around 2:20 in the morning. I got into bed, turned off the light, and lay there running through my task list in my head the way I always do. That's when I heard the shuffling again. Except this time it didn't stop. It was continuous. It moved. Not just the same spot. It moved slowly across whatever surface was above me, from one side of the room toward the other. I sat up in bed and listened. The crawl space. The house had a crawl space accessed from the hallway ceiling. I'd looked up at it exactly once since moving in and never thought about it again. It was small and low, and I had no use for it. But it was directly above the bedroom. The movement stopped, and then I heard something else. Something that I'm aware sounds absurd. Breathing. Slow and steady from right above me. I know how that sounds. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it was the pipes. I told myself a lot of things in about 30 seconds. And then I got out of bed. I don't know what I was planning. I think I needed to prove to myself that it was nothing, because the alternative was not something I was willing to sit with. The crawl space had a pull-down panel in the hallway ceiling with a cord that you yanked down. I got a step stool from the linen closet, reached up, grabbed the cord, and pulled. The panel didn't open. I pulled harder. When it finally came down, I went up the small fold-out ladder slowly and just stuck my head into the space. It was dark. The beam of my phone flashlight got about 6 feet before losing definition. I could see the 2 main support beams running parallel on each side, thick and old. I couldn't see past them. I hung there for maybe 10 seconds, heard nothing, saw nothing, and came back down. I was shaking. I noticed that when I was trying to fold the ladder back up, I hadn't realized how scared I'd become until I was standing in the hallway trying to get my hands to cooperate. I went downstairs and turned on every light and sat on the couch with the television on. I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking about the second beam, the one on the far side of the crawl space. I hadn't been able to see past it. I didn't know what was behind it. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard a door. A soft creak somewhere upstairs. Slow, like someone being careful. I was off the couch and standing in the middle of the living room before I even processed that I'd moved. I stood there and listened. I heard nothing else. But I had to check. I know that was the wrong call. I know I should have called someone. I've said that many times since. But I stood there thinking, maybe I left a window open and there's a draft. Maybe the house is just settling. I picked up the fireplace poker from the rack by the couch and went upstairs. The pull cord for the crawl space was still hanging where I'd left it, except it was moving. Not a lot, just a gentle sway. I stopped at the top of the stairs and watched it for a long time. It could have still been moving from when I pulled it earlier. I told myself that. I'm not sure I believed it. I went to my bedroom. The door was almost fully closed. I always leave it open. I run warm and I sleep better with airflow. I pushed it open. The room looked exactly as I'd left it. Bed unmade, the lamp off on the nightstand, my shoes by the closet. I was scanning the room when I noticed something on the floor beside the bed, a small clod of dirt, just sitting there on the hardwood next to my nightstand leg. I bent down to look at it, and while I was crouched down low, I heard the breathing again, directly in front of me, from under the bed. I put my hand on the floor and lowered my head and looked. There was a man lying under my bed, fully clothed on his back, looking up at the slats. He turned his head and looked at me. We were maybe 2 feet apart. He had dark, deep-set eyes and a stillness about him that was worse than if he'd been moving. Then he said very quietly, "It's all right, Naomi, it's just me." My name is not Naomi. I don't know anyone named Naomi. I've thought about that almost every day since. I don't remember getting down the stairs. I remember being outside in my car in the driveway with the doors locked and the engine running and my phone in my hand. I called 911 from the driveway. I told them there was a man in my house. They sent 2 cars. They searched the entire house. He was gone. They found a small camping pillow wedged behind the far beam in the crawl space. They found 4 empty water bottles in the corner of the basement utility room behind the hot water heater, tucked behind the tank where you wouldn't see them unless you were looking. They found one of my kitchen chairs pushed against the back wall of my home office closet, which had no reason for a chair to be in it. He had been in my house for a long time. That's what the detective said to me. Not days. Long enough to know his way around. I stayed with my sister for 6 weeks. When I finally went back, I had a security company install cameras inside and out, a monitored alarm, and contact sensors on every window and both attic access panels. The police identified a possible person of interest, a man my father had a falling out with years ago who I was told had become unstable, but they never made an arrest. They never confirmed it was him. They never found the man under my bed. And whatever name he called me, whoever he thought I was, he said it like he'd been waiting a long time to say it. That's the part I can't stop turning over. The look on his face wasn't frightened, the way you'd expect someone caught to look. He looked relieved, like he'd finally been found. I don't live alone anymore. I have a roommate now, a colleague named Danny, who I told the full story to before she moved in. She didn't flinch. I'm grateful for that. But I want to be honest. Even with the cameras, even with the alarm, I still check under the bed every single night before I turn off the light. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that.